The Outsider's Arrival. Under the artificial atmosphere of Orbital Academy 9, where stars twinkled beyond transparent dome ceilings and gravity fluctuated according to species needs, the day began like any other. Students of 100 different species traversed the bioadaptive hallways, some slithering, others floating, many walking on various configurations of limbs. The Academy had seen 18,000 cycles of intergalactic education, housing the brightest young minds from across the known universe. What made today different was the arrival of Ellie Rhodes. Ellie stood in the central atrium, her standard-issue environmental suit still uncomfortable against her skin, her dark curly hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. At 16 Earth years, she represented something the Academy had never seen before, the first human student ever admitted. Earth's recent discovery and controversial fast-tracking into the Galactic Alliance had raised eyebrows, or equivalent sensory appendages, across multiple sectors. Specimen appears disoriented, chirped a floating spherical drone, circling Ellie's head. Oxygen levels within acceptable parameters. Body temperature stable. Psychological stress indicators elevated but non-critical. "I can hear you," Ellie muttered, adjusting the translator module clipped to her collar. "And I'm not a specimen." The drone blinked its optical sensor. Correction, student appears disoriented. Principal Administrator Zorlak, a towering 8-limbed being with translucent blue skin, glided toward Ellie with practiced diplomatic smoothness. "Welcome to Orbital Academy 9, Ellie Rhodes of Earth. We are most intrigued by your presence." Ellie nodded, trying to maintain eye contact with the uppermost set of Principal Zorlak's 4 eyes, as she'd been instructed during her brief orientation. "Thank you for the opportunity, Administrator. I'm honored to represent Earth." "Indeed." The principal's voice resonated with harmonics that suggested both curiosity and skepticism. "Your species is quite new to our galactic community. Your admission was expedited." The unspoken question hung in the recycled air: why was this primitive species suddenly given a place at the most prestigious academy in the galaxy? "My dormitory assignment?" Ellie asked, changing the subject. "Ah, yes." The administrator gestured to a holographic map that materialized between them. "Dormitory Block Epsilon, adapted for carbon-based oxygen breathers. You'll be sharing quarters with representatives from 3 compatible atmospheres. Your schedule has been uploaded to your personal device." As Ellie navigated through the crowded corridors toward her assigned quarters, she felt the stares. Some curious, some dismissive, some openly hostile. She'd been prepared for this. Earth's diplomatic corps had stressed that she would be an ambassador as much as a student. Block Epsilon turned out to be nestled in what appeared to be a massive artificial tree structure, with rooms built into hollowed-out sections of the trunk and branches. Ellie's assigned room was marked with her name and a simplified human silhouette icon that looked nothing like her. "Great," she muttered, pressing her palm against the biometric scanner. The door slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, 3 beings froze mid-conversation. The first, seemingly made of crystalline structures that refracted light in hypnotic patterns, hovered slightly above a conforming chair. The second appeared to be a 4-armed, green-furred creature with large, expressive eyes. The third was surprisingly humanoid, though with pale orange skin and delicate gill structures along its neck. Hello," Ellie ventured. "I'm Ellie. From Earth." The crystalline being emitted a series of melodic tones that her translator interpreted as, "The human has arrived." How fascinating. Such primitive structural integrity. "Don't be rude, Xylix," said the 4-armed green being. "Welcome, Earthchild. I am Pax, 3rd-generation diplomatic attaché from Valoria." Pax extended all 4 arms in what Ellie assumed was a greeting gesture. "And I'm Nairi," said the orange-skinned humanoid, approaching with a friendly smile. "Aquatic adaptation specialist from Maryland. We've been expecting you." Ellie relaxed slightly. "It's nice to meet you all. I'm still getting used to everything." Understandable, Nairi said. Your planet was only officially recognized last solar cycle. You must feel quite overwhelmed. Before Ellie could respond, an alert chimed from all their devices simultaneously. First assembly in 10 minutes, Xylix chimed. We should proceed to the Grand Hall. The Grand Hall of Orbital Academy 9 was a marvel of intergalactic architecture, a vast space designed to accommodate beings of all sizes and environmental needs. Transparent force field separated sections with different atmospheric compositions. Gravity plates allowed for customized weight preferences. Temperature zones ranged from near absolute zero to plasma-adjacent heat. Ellie followed her roommates to the section designated for oxygen breathers, taking a seat on what appeared to be a standard chair, a rarity in this environment of diverse body types. The assembly began with Principal Zorlak addressing the gathered students, hovering above the central platform. Welcome to the 73rd cycle of Orbital Academy 9. As representatives of your respective worlds, you carry the future of galactic cooperation in your various appendages. A ripple of polite sounds, the equivalent of applause, moved through the assembly. This cycle brings us an unprecedented addition, Zorlak continued, gesture appendages moving in formal patterns. We welcome our first student from the newly discovered planet Earth. All eyes, sensory stalks, and perception organs turned toward Ellie. She sat straighter, fighting the urge to shrink under the collective gaze of hundreds of alien students. The human will stand, came a commanding voice from the translator. Ellie rose, feeling her face flush. As is tradition, all new species representatives must introduce themselves and their world's primary contribution to galactic knowledge. Ellie swallowed hard. No one had mentioned this ritual. I'm Ellie Rhodes, from Earth. Our planet has. What could she say? Earth was barely spacefaring, had only recently made first contact, and possessed technology centuries behind most species present. Earth excels at adaptation and innovation. We solve problems with limited resources. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Not impressive compared to the quantum engineering of the Zorillians or the transdimensional mathematics of the Vorax. From the Voraxian section came a loud, rumbling laugh. Ellie's eyes darted to its source, a massive, reptilian being with armored skin, gleaming yellow eyes, and impressively sharp teeth visible even at this distance. The primitive claims adaptation as their contribution, the translator rendered in flat tones, unable to capture the evident mockery in the original. Perhaps they can adapt to being irrelevant. Several nearby students chittered or bubbled in what appeared to be laughter. Principal Zorlak's upper limbs made a cutting motion. Krazak of Vorax Prime, respect protocols apply to all students. The massive reptilian, Krazak, inclined his head in what was clearly insincere deference. Of course, Administrator. I merely question the expedited inclusion of a species that has yet to master basic interstellar travel independently. Ellie felt heat rise to her face. She knew Earth's admission had been controversial, but to be called out so publicly on her first day. Perhaps, she found herself saying before her diplomatic training could kick in, the Voraxian representative could explain how his species adapted after the quantum collapse of their third moon? I believe that was thanks to Zorillian intervention, wasn't it? The assembly went deadly silent. Even Principal Zorlak seemed frozen in place. Krazak's yellow eyes narrowed to slits, his massive form tensing visibly. The human has been studying, he said, voice a dangerous rumble. But reading history and understanding it are different matters. Just as being physically imposing and being intellectually relevant are different matters, Ellie responded, immediately regretting her words. So much for diplomatic training. The tension in the air was palpable. Several students had activated personal shield generators. Principal Zorlak's voice cut through the silence. Enough. Orbital Academy 9 exists to foster understanding, not provoke ancient grievances. All students will report to their first educational modules. Assembly dismissed. As the students began to disperse, Ellie felt a firm grip on her arm. Nairi was pulling her away quickly. "Are you trying to get yourself dissolved on your first day?" the orange-skinned girl hissed. "Do you have any idea who you just challenged?" Ellie shook her head, suddenly feeling the weight of her impulsive words. Krozak is the son of War Commander Vrazak, the most decorated military leader in the Varaxian Empire. His family controls 3 solar systems and has direct lineage to the Emperor. "And Varaxians," Pax added, all 4 arms making agitated gestures, "never forget an insult." "I didn't know," Ellie said weakly. "He provoked me." "And you responded by referencing the most humiliating moment in recent Varaxian history," Xylix chimed, crystal structure pulsing with what appeared to be alarm. "The quantum collapse killed millions and forced them to accept outside help. It is not discussed." As they hurried toward their first class, Ellie caught sight of Krozak watching her from across the atrium, yellow eyes burning with unmistakable malice. The massive Varaxian made a deliberate gesture, one talon drawn slowly across his throat. No translator was needed for that message. During physics of interdimensional travel, Ellie struggled to follow equations that seemed to violate everything she'd learned about physics on Earth. Professor Kulner, a being that appeared to exist partially in another dimension, parts of its body occasionally disappeared and reappeared, spoke in concepts that her translator sometimes failed to render properly. "The human appears confused," the professor noted halfway through the lecture. "Perhaps we should begin with more rudimentary concepts for our newest edition." Several students made sounds that her translator didn't catch but context suggested were snickers. "I can follow the material," Ellie insisted, though the holographic equations floating before her might as well have been abstract art. "The translator just has occasional lag." Pax, sitting beside her, quietly transferred additional notes to her tablet. "Most species have been studying these principles since early development stages," the Valorian whispered. "Don't feel bad." By lunchtime, Ellie was mentally exhausted. The Academy's Nutrition Center was another marvel of inclusivity, separate stations for every conceivable dietary need, from photosynthesis chambers to plasma energy absorbers to more conventional food synthesizers. "Over here," Nairi called, waving from a table in the oxygen breather section. "We saved you a spot." Ellie navigated through the crowd, her tray loaded with what the synthesizer had assured her was Earth-compatible protein configuration with hydration supplement, which looked suspiciously like gray tofu and blue water. She was just about to reach the table when something massive stepped into her path. Her tray collided with armored scales, sending her lunch splattering across the floor. "Watch where you're walking, primitive," Krozak growled, towering over her. "Your kind hasn't learned proper navigation yet, clearly." Behind him stood 3 other Varaxians, smaller but no less intimidating, all watching with predatory amusement. "That was deliberate," Ellie said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Maybe on your world, physical intimidation impresses people, but—" "On my world," Krozak interrupted, leaning down until his reptilian face was inches from hers, "creatures like you serve as labor or food. Your presence here is a political stunt that will be corrected soon enough." The nutrition center had gone quiet, hundreds of students watching the confrontation. Ellie felt her heart pounding but refused to back down. "If I'm so insignificant," she said, "why are you so threatened by me?" Krozak's eyes widened slightly, then narrowed. "Threatened? By a soft-skinned, atmosphere-dependent primate with fragile bones and limited lifespan? You misunderstand, Earth thing. I'm not threatened. I'm offended that my educational experience must be diluted by your presence." "Krozak," came a stern voice. A tall, willowy being with 6 arms had approached, one of the faculty. "This behavior violates conduct protocols." The Varaxian straightened, somehow making even that movement seem threatening. "Professor Ilthi. I was merely explaining cultural differences to our new classmate." "Return to your section," the professor said firmly. "All of you." As Krozak and his entourage moved away, he looked back at Ellie. This isn't over, human. Your kind doesn't belong here, and soon everyone will understand why. Professor Ilthy helped Ellie clean up the mess. You must be careful, Ellie Rhodes. Varaxians are traditional in their views of hierarchy and strength. So I've noticed, Ellie muttered. There is more at play here than simple bullying, the professor said quietly. Earth's admission to the Galactic Alliance and this academy was controversial. Many powerful interests opposed it. Why? Ellie asked. We're hardly a threat to anyone. The professor's expression was unreadable. Perhaps that is precisely what makes certain species uncomfortable. Your afternoon module is comparative xenobiology. I suggest you don't be late. By the end of her first day, Ellie collapsed onto her conforming bed, physically and emotionally drained. The bed adjusted to her body shape, providing oddly precise support. You survived, Nairi observed, sitting cross-legged on her own bed. That's more than some first-day students manage. Barely, Ellie groaned. I've made an enemy of the most dangerous student, understood maybe 10% of my classes, and managed to publicly embarrass myself multiple times. You stood up to Krozak, Pax noted, all four arms busy with different tasks, writing in a journal, adjusting a device, eating a snack, and gesturing as they spoke. Many find that impressive. Xylix's crystalline form pulsed with soft light. The human displayed unusual behavior patterns. Most new species representatives attempt to integrate through submission to established hierarchies. Is that a compliment? Ellie asked. An observation, Xylix chimed. Though your confrontational response has created a 78.3% probability of further conflict. Great, Ellie sighed. Her personal device chimed with a notification. New message, encrypted. She opened it curiously. The text was simple, combat training. Maintenance level B, 0400 hours. Come alone. What's this? She wondered aloud. Nairi glanced at the message and raised her eyebrows. Someone wants to help you survive Krozak. The question is, who? And why? Ellie stared at the message, wondering what she'd gotten herself into. Her first day at the academy had made one thing abundantly clear: she wasn't just a student here. She was at the center of something much bigger than herself. And tomorrow, apparently, she would begin learning how to fight back. The emergency klaxons aboard Horizon Station screamed through another sleepless night shift. James Marshall wiped grease from his hands and stared at the flickering diagnostic panel, wondering if the aging station systems would hold together for another cycle. 12 years as a civilian engineer had taught him that space stations, like old machines, had their own way of dying. The station shuddered. Not the usual tremor of failing stabilizers, but something else. Something wrong. James grabbed his toolkit and sprinted toward the maintenance shaft, his boots clanging against metal grating. Another impact rocked the station, throwing him against a wall. This wasn't a mechanical failure, they were under attack. Through the observation window, he saw them, sleek, black ships with purple energy signatures, unlike anything in the human fleet. They moved with impossible precision, cutting through Horizon's defenses like they weren't even there. James knew he should run, find shelter in the emergency bunkers. Instead, he found himself transfixed by their deadly dance. The next explosion came from inside. The maintenance shaft ahead erupted in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. James dove behind a support beam as something emerged from the smoke. No, not something, someone. A warrior in gleaming obsidian armor, nearly 7 feet tall, moved with liquid grace through the destruction. Two smaller figures in similar armor pursued, firing weapons that left scorch marks on the walls. The tall warrior spun, a blade of pure energy igniting in their hands. In one fluid motion, they cut down their pursuers. The fallen attacker's armor dissolved, revealing reptilian features under their helmets. The victor turned toward James's hiding spot, and he felt his heart stop. The warrior's helmet retracted, revealing a face that was both alien and haunting. Iridescent scales in shades of deep blue caught the emergency lights, framing features that seemed almost feline. Most striking were the eyes, silver with hints of purple, carrying an intelligence that pierced right through him. "You," the warrior spoke, voice feminine but with an otherworldly resonance. "You will help me." James stepped out slowly, hands raised. "I don't suppose that's actually a request. I am Kraith of the Nexarian Empire. Or I was, until this night." She glanced at the dead warriors. "These assassins prove my suspicions correct. There is corruption at the heart of both our civilizations, human. A conspiracy that will destroy everything if we don't stop it." "Look," James said, trying to keep his voice steady, "I'm just a maintenance engineer. Whatever Game of Thrones you're playing up there dash." Another explosion cut him off. Kraith's head snapped toward the sound, her scaled features tensing. "They're coming. More assassins, and worse. You know this station's systems, its hidden paths? Every bolt and conduit. Then you are exactly what I need." She stepped closer, towering over him. "Help me survive this night, and I will show you truths that will change your understanding of everything. Refuse, and we both die here." James looked at the dead warriors, then at the warrior before him. Everything he knew said to run. But there was something in those alien eyes, desperation, yes, but also integrity. Whatever was happening here was bigger than one station, bigger than one night. "The maintenance tunnels," he said finally. "They run through the whole station. We can use them to dash." Plasma fire erupted from both ends of the corridor. Kraith grabbed James and pulled him through the nearest doorway, her armor absorbing hits that would have vaporized him. They tumbled into a storage room as more warriors charged past their position. "Your tunnels," Kraith said, helping him up. "Show me." James pried open a hidden panel, revealing a narrow passage. "Hope you're not claustrophobic. Save the humor for when we survive." But there was the slightest quirk to her scaled lips. As they crawled through the station's arteries, James couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just irrevocably changed. Outside, he could hear the battle raging, the station groaning under the assault. But here in the dark, crawling beside an alien warrior who had just upended his world, he felt something he hadn't expected: purpose. "Why me?" he whispered as they paused at a junction. Kraith's silver eyes found his in the darkness. "Because in all my years of watching your kind, you humans consistently do one thing that amazes us: when faced with impossible choices, you choose to help. Even when it makes no sense. Even when it might destroy you." She checked her weapon's charge. "I need that quality now more than ever." James nodded slowly, understanding that he wasn't just helping her escape. He was choosing sides in a war he didn't yet understand. "Then let's make sure we live long enough for you to explain everything." They pressed on through the darkness, as above them, Horizon Station burned. The night was far from over, and this was just the beginning of a story that would reshape two civilizations, all because an alien warrior chose to trust a human engineer who couldn't walk away from someone in need. The stolen maintenance shuttle groaned as James pushed it beyond its intended limits. Behind them, Horizon Station diminished against the star-filled backdrop, occasional explosions still lighting up its skeletal frame. In the co-pilot's seat, Kraith worked on her armor systems, her scaled fingers dancing over holographic displays only she could see. "We have maybe 20 minutes before they realize this shuttle's missing," James said, checking their fuel reserves. "Please tell me you have a plan beyond, steal the engineer's ride." Kraith's silver eyes flickered to him. "There is a trading outpost in the Vega Drift. Independent. No allegiance to either of our governments. We can acquire a proper ship there." "With what money?" She held up a small crystal that pulsed with inner light. Some things are worth more than credits. James focused on piloting, trying not to think about how surreal his life had become in the past few hours. So, about that explanation you promised. The one about why there were assassins trying to kill you, and why you picked me of all people to help. Kraith was silent for a long moment, her scaled features impossible to read. Finally, she spoke, her voice carrying a weight James hadn't heard before. I was First Blade of the Nexarian Special Operations Division. Our most elite unit, answering directly to the High Command. 3 cycles ago, I discovered something during a routine mission. Something that shouldn't exist. The shuttle's sensors pinged. James adjusted their course, threading them through a field of debris. What kind of something? Evidence that members of both our governments have been working together in secret. Not for peace, but for power. Her hand tightened on her deactivated energy blade. They're developing weapons that could devastate entire systems. Technology that combines the worst aspects of both our species. And they tried to kill you to keep it quiet? They tried to discredit me first. Called me unstable, paranoid. Said my time in combat had broken something in my mind. Her laugh was bitter. When that didn't work, yes, they tried to kill me. James processed this, remembering the precision with which the assassins had attacked the station. But why come to Horizon? Why risk exposure by seeking out a human? In xenobiology, Professor Larn, a amorphous being contained within a hovering environmental suit, had assigned group projects analyzing the biological adaptations of various species to their home environments. For this assignment, Professor Larn announced, gelatinous form pulsing with each word, I will be selecting your groups to ensure diversity of perspective. Ellie held her breath as the assignments were displayed on the holographic projector. Her heart sank when she saw her name listed alongside Krozak, Vorax Prime, and Teo, Quatri 4. Across the room, Krozak's yellow eyes fixed on her, his expression a mix of disgust and malicious anticipation. After class, Krozak cornered her in the hallway, looming over her with his impressive height. Unlike the previous day, he was alone. Listen carefully, human, he growled, voice low. I will not allow your primitive intellect to compromise my academic standing. You will complete your portion of the project according to my specifications, or what? Ellie interrupted, surprising herself with her boldness. You'll threaten me again? Report me to the administrators? Krozak blinked, momentarily taken aback by her defiance. Then his expression darkened. Do not mistake my restraint for weakness, Earthling. There are no recording devices in this corridor. Yet you're still just talking, Ellie said, heart pounding but standing her ground. Maybe Voraxians are all threat and no action? She was drawing on Vextor's first lesson, against a physically superior opponent, psychological tactics can create hesitation. Most dominant species are unused to direct challenges from those they consider beneath them. Krozak's scales rippled with anger, a low hiss escaping his jaws. For a moment, Ellie thought she'd miscalculated badly. Then, unexpectedly, the Voraxian stepped back. Interesting, he said, studying her with newfound curiosity. Perhaps there is more to your kind than fragile bones and soft skin. Very well, human. We will meet in study chamber 12 at 1800 hours to begin the project. Do not be late. As Krozak stalked away, Ellie released the breath she'd been holding. She wasn't sure if she'd just made things better or worse. Study Chamber 12 was one of the Academy's smaller research rooms, equipped with holographic interfaces and specialized research tools. When Ellie arrived precisely at 1800 hours, she found Krozak already there, along with their third group member, a small, floating being that appeared to be made of interconnected geometric shapes. I am Teo, the being introduced itself, patterns of light pulsing across its geometric surface. Quatrian mathematical specialist. Pleased to meet you, Earth representative. Ellie, she corrected gently. Nice to meet you too. Krazak made a dismissive sound. Let us proceed efficiently. The assignment requires analysis of 3 distinct evolutionary pathways. I suggest we each analyze our own species. That seems reasonable, Ellie agreed cautiously. I have already begun preliminary analysis of Varaxian adaptation, Krazak continued, activating a holographic display showing detailed anatomical scans of his species. Our armored epidermis evolved in response to the high radiation levels of Vorax Prime, while our enhanced strength developed due to the planet's 1.8x standard gravity. The presentation was surprisingly thorough and scientifically sound. Ellie realized she'd made the mistake of assuming Krazak was all brawn and no brain. Telo's presentation followed, a fascinating exploration of how quatrians had evolved from fixed crystalline structures into mobile energy beings capable of manipulating their own molecular configuration. Then it was Ellie's turn. She'd spent hours preparing her portion, knowing she represented not just herself but all of humanity. Humans evolved on a planet with highly variable conditions, she began, activating her own holographic display showing Earth's diverse ecosystems. Instead of specializing for one environment, we developed general adaptability, opposable thumbs for tool use, omnivorous digestion, and most significantly, a brain structure optimized for pattern recognition and creative problem-solving. As she continued her presentation, she noticed something unexpected. Krazak was listening with apparent interest. His hostile demeanor had shifted to one of intellectual curiosity. You claim your species' primary adaptation is neural rather than physical, he asked when she finished. How has this benefited your survival without natural weapons or defenses? We created artificial ones, Ellie explained. Tools, weapons, shelters, medicines. When we couldn't run as fast as predators, we built vehicles. When we couldn't fly, we built aircraft. Our adaptability is our specialization. Telo's geometric form pulsed with excitement. Fascinating approach to evolutionary pressure. Instead of changing the organism to fit the environment, change the environment to fit the organism. Inefficient, Krazak argued, but without his usual hostility. External tools can be lost or broken. Biological adaptations are permanent. But they're also fixed, Ellie countered. If conditions change dramatically, specialized species struggle to adapt quickly enough. Humans can change strategies almost instantly. The discussion continued for hours, evolving from a simple academic exercise into a profound philosophical debate about different evolutionary strategies. By the time they finished their project, a comparative analysis titled Divergent Paths, Specialization versus Adaptability in Sentient Evolution, Ellie realized something had shifted in her dynamic with Krazak. Not friendship, certainly. But perhaps a grudging intellectual respect. As they were packing up, Krazak approached her while Teo was distracted with data uploads. Your species is not what I expected, he admitted reluctantly. Though still primitive in many ways. Coming from him, this was practically a glowing compliment. Thanks, I think, Ellie replied. Do not misunderstand, Krazak added, voice lowered. This changes nothing regarding your place here. The political implications of Earth's admission remain problematic. What political implications? Ellie asked, seizing the opportunity. Everyone keeps hinting at some bigger issue, but no one will explain it directly. Krazak's eyes narrowed. You truly don't know? Perhaps your own leaders have not been forthcoming. He seemed to debate internally before continuing. The Galactic Alliance maintains balance through careful management of technological advancement. Species are admitted only when their development curve is predictable and controllable. And Earth's isn't? Your kind went from primitive combustion engines to rudimentary nuclear fission in less than a century, Krazak said. From basic computing to neural interfaces in even less time. The projection model suggests that, left unchecked, Earth could achieve technological parity with thousand-year-old civilizations within just a few generations. Ellie processed this with growing unease. So we're being, what? Contained? Managed, Krozak corrected. Though some factions believe more aggressive measures are warranted. Before she could ask more questions, Teo returned, and Krozak immediately reverted to his more formal demeanor. But as they parted ways, the Varaxian gave her a look that seemed almost like a warning. The next morning, Ellie awoke to find the academy in an uproar. Overnight, someone had accessed the Central Information System and released classified documents regarding Earth's admission to the Galactic Alliance. The documents revealed that Earth had been fast-tracked not out of diplomatic goodwill but out of concern. Many council members believed it safer to bring humans under galactic oversight than to allow them to develop independently. More disturbing were the contingency plans outlined for aggressive containment, should Earth's development prove too unpredictable or threatening. Students whispered in corridors, many casting suspicious glances at Ellie as she made her way to her first class. Even her roommates seemed uncomfortable, avoiding direct conversation about the leaked documents. "Did you know about this?" Nairi finally asked as they sat together in the nutrition center, her orange skin paler than usual with worry. "Of course not," Ellie said, pushing her food around her plate. "I'm as shocked as everyone else." "The implications are concerning," Xylix chimed, crystal structure vibrating in what Ellie had come to recognize as anxiety. "If these documents are authentic, Earth has been classified as a potential Class 3 developmental risk." "What does that even mean?" Ellie asked. Pax's 4 arms made nervous gestures. "It means your planet is viewed as having the potential for rapid, unpredictable technological advancement that could destabilize established power structures. Class 3 is just below the classification given to artificial superintelligences." Ellie felt cold. "That's ridiculous. We've barely achieved reliable interplanetary travel." "It's not what you've achieved," came a familiar voice. "It's what you might achieve." Vextor stood behind them, his lean gray form drawing curious looks from nearby students. He rarely appeared in public areas of the academy. "The leak was deliberate," he continued, sitting down at their table. "Someone wants to force the issue into the open." "Who?" Ellie asked. "That," said Vextor, "is the question everyone is asking. Some believe it was Earth sympathizers within the Progressive Coalition. Others suspect traditional bloc hardliners seeking to justify stricter controls. Or," came another voice, deep and rumbling, "perhaps the humans themselves." Krozak approached their table, flanked by 2 other Varaxians. But unlike previous encounters, his posture wasn't overtly threatening. "Excuse me?" Ellie stood, facing him. "It would be a clever maneuver," Krozak observed. "Release damaging information preemptively to control the narrative and garner sympathy." "That's absurd," Ellie protested. "I had no idea about any of this." Krozak studied her for a long moment. "Perhaps not you specifically. But someone from your world orchestrated your presence here. Someone aware of the political implications." Vextor's black eyes shifted between them. "The Varaxian makes a valid point. You are a piece in a game whose board you cannot yet see," Ellie Rhodes. The atmosphere in the nutrition center had grown tense, other students watching the exchange with undisguised interest. "If I'm just a pawn," Ellie said loudly enough for others to hear, "then I deserve to know who's moving me and why. And so does everyone else being manipulated by these political games." A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. Many students nodded in agreement, regardless of species or faction. Krozak's expression was unreadable, but something in his posture had changed. "Your species continues to surprise, human. Few would so openly challenge the established order." "Maybe that's exactly why we're classified as a risk," Ellie replied. An announcement chimed through the Academy's communication system: "All students report to the Grand Hall immediately. Emergency assembly in progress." Krozak glanced at the ceiling, then back to Ellie. "It seems the game accelerates. Come, Earth Thing. Let us see what new moves our masters have prepared. As they made their way to the assembly, an unlikely group forming around her, Nairi, Pax, Xylix, Vextor, and now even Krozak and his followers, Ellie couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. The leaked documents had transformed her overnight from a curiosity to a symbol. The question now was, a symbol of what? Threat or opportunity? Cautionary tale or catalyst for change? As they entered the Grand Hall, where Principal Zorlak waited with a delegation of stern-looking officials from various worlds, Ellie steeled herself. Whatever game was being played, she was done being a passive piece on the board. If they wanted to see human adaptability in action, she would show them exactly how dangerous an underestimated species could be.